Welcome back. A big story developing today from Russia and Ukraine as a continuation of the war that's been going on for the better part of the last year. Russia making a big claim today that 2 Ukrainian drones tried an attempted assassination hit on Russian President Vladimir Putin. He was not at the Kremlin when the incident happened, and he's now working in a secure location. Russia, of course, claims that this was done at the behest of Ukraine. Ukraine has stoutly denied that, saying that this was most likely done by Russian mercenaries who are now not in the control of the Kremlin. Could this be a turning point in this year-long war? Could Russia use this, if for nothing else, but as an excuse to try and launch a counter-offensive against Ukraine? And where does this war go from here? Joining me now is a veteran global affairs commentator, someone who we've been in touch with and speaking to at regular intervals during the course of this war, and of course to try and put some perspective into what may be the near-term direction of this war. The host of GPS on CNN, Zakaria, is now joining me. Thank you very much, Fareed, for speaking with us here on CNN News 18 on such an important day.
My pleasure, Zaka. Good to be with you.
Let's start with this big claim that has been made by the Kremlin. Overnight, they say that there were 2 Ukrainian drones that made an attempted assassination hit on Vladimir Putin. How do you view these allegations? What is the reading also, both in the White House and the U.S. intelligence community, about this big claim that's being made from Russia's side?
The feeling here is that it is probably not true. The Ukrainians certainly could fly a drone that far. I think it's about 800 kilometers. But it's not clear why they would do so, why they would do so now. Putin's offices and homes are very well fortified. It's highly unlikely that you could achieve very much with it. And the Ukrainians deny it. It's always possible that they've done it, but it's worth remembering, first, their supposition that it could be Russian mercenaries who in some way angry with Putin, Russian soldiers. It's also worth remembering Putin has a lot of enemies within Russia. There are dissidents in Russia. There are disgruntled oligarchs. And you know what this really shows us, and this is an ominous sign of the future of war, these things are very easy to do. You don't need to have a powerful army that's well equipped the way the Ukrainian army is now. Drones are not that expensive. They're easy to operate. Whether or not this was a highly weaponized drone, we don't know. But we certainly know that it would not be difficult for many parties to fly a drone that far into Russian territory.
So you've said that this could likely be some kind of a false flag operation, or this is a tall claim being made by Russia, and that Ukraine is unlikely or even have the capability to try and pull off something like this. Do you, precisely for those reasons, fear that Russia could use this as some kind of an excuse for a counteroffensive and even choose to escalate it? Putin has been making these repeated threats for the last year about pressing the nuclear button and using tactical nuclear weapons and so on and so forth? Or do you reckon that they will not wager climbing the escalation ladder for something like what happened today?
Well, at one level, the Russians have been escalating all year. They have been bombing civilian targets well outside of the areas of battle. They've been bombing hospitals. They've been bombing nursery schools. They bombed power supplies. They bombed Kyiv several times, even though that's far from the battle lines. What they haven't done is use any kind of tactical nuclear weapons and things like that. I doubt very much Russia would do that. I think that Putin knows that were he to go down that path, he would almost certainly lose the tacit support of China, India. He might even get pressured by both those countries. It would be a strategic game changer in terms of the way in which the world viewed the conflict, and he wouldn't gain that much it's not as if the Ukrainians would surrender because Putin used one tactical nuclear weapon. For the Ukrainians, this is an existential struggle about the future of their nation. And I doubt very much that they would change that. No, the battle lines have hardened. We will wait to see what the Ukrainian offensive will look like. But I think in broad terms, what you're looking at is some kind of a stalemate where the Ukrainians will probably gain some territory in their counteroffensive over the next few months. But they will probably not liberate all of the Donbass, all of Crimea. And so at that point, you do have to start wondering whether or not there is a path to negotiations, there is a path to some kind of settlement. It will be very difficult. Neither side is strong enough to win, but neither side is willing yet to compromise. And that's why this is likely to be a kind of protracted stalemate.
You've said a moment ago, and we've seen repeated statements from Ukrainian leaders about this potential counteroffensive, this coming counteroffensive, including today when President Zelensky of Ukraine said that the counteroffensive is going to happen soon. Do you believe that today's attack gives Russia a handle or an excuse to try and derail that counteroffensive, or at least, if not on the ground, to try and alter the terms of narrative around that counteroffensive? And how do you see the trajectory of this war, if at all this counteroffensive is going to get underway in the next few days? How do you see the near-term trajectory of this war?
I doubt that it gives Russia much of an advantage. Look, the issue is now really about what is going on in the areas of battle. And what is happening there is not particularly related to a drone strike on the Kremlin. There, as I say, it seems to be a stalemate. The Ukrainians will try, I think, to push back and in a sense, liberate parts of the territory that Russia conquered in 2022. I think they'll have some success, but I think what's really going to be much harder is liberating the territories that Russia conquered in 2014, which is when they first took the Crimea and parts of the Donbass. Because there the Russians have hardened their battle lines. They've been in there for almost a decade. They have fortifications, and they have some support from the local population, because those are heavily Russian-speaking parts of Ukraine. So all that means that I think while Ukraine will do well, I think in this counteroffensive, it will not do well enough to achieve a kind of complete victory. So we're back to the idea of a protracted stalemate.
So now let me come to your recent visit to India, where you say you've seen some changes. You've called them 3 revolutions that are happening vis-a-vis Aadhaar, the Geo Revolution, and of course the building of physical infrastructure. You also did a CNN piece on this on your show GPS. What is it that you saw qualitatively about these 3 revolutions that was different from any of the times you've visited previously?
I think it was really the combination of the 3, the way in which they have all come together, and the way in which they are all now kind of, in a sense, self-reinforcing. Look, I come to India very often. I was in India a week ago, but I was there in December. I'll be back in October. I've come to India at least once or twice a year for the last 35 years. But what I saw this time was that it was almost as though you had Aadhaar as the fundamental base, which has created this extraordinary platform, an open, publicly owned platform that instantly verifies the identity of 99.9% of Indian adults. It's a triple stack, as it were. On that is stacked the UPI, the payment system. But now you have the digital wallet, which allows you to store data like, for example, the sales tax data using the GST, all of which has created a kind of digital transformation of India that allows people to very easily participate in the digital economy. And that is in some ways all working together now and you add to it the physical infrastructure that is really being transformed, and that is still a work in progress. And it just felt like you had synergy now on all three of these fronts that was really quite extraordinary.
India has been talking for some time now, and the Prime Minister has been talking about making India a $5 trillion economy. Of course, COVID created a big dent in that path. But I just want to know your thoughts. India is now currently about $3.5 trillion. It is currently the fifth largest economy in the world, going past the UK. Do you see this as India's time, as is being portrayed certainly here in India, and I guess global investors, at least some of them, are calling this India's time? And what would be the gap between the potential that India has been displaying, as you say, for 20 years plus now, and its ability to match, let's say, a China?
It's a great moment for India. It's a great opportunity, but it is an opportunity. It is still not fully realized. I know that there's been much celebration in India about the symbolic passing of Britain as, in terms of the size of the economy, which is well deserved. It's worth pointing out, however, Britain generates that economy with, 70 million people, and India generates its economy with 1.3, 1.4 billion people. So there is still a long way to go. I think there are two areas that I worry about. One is India is still not that friendly to doing business. Foreign investors who come in, foreign companies who come in, always are struck by how much more difficult it is to operate in India than not just China, but even a country like Indonesia, where there's, for example, much more large-scale manufacturing than there is in India. So that sort of ease of doing business, India needs to move up the ease of doing business index. The World Bank tabulates these things. The second, I think, is education. You have millions of people entering the workforce, and India has not really managed to scale education at almost every level, particularly at the level of just skilled workers, not college graduates, not that kind of thing, the kind of people who would fill the factories to produce things like the iPhone and its component parts. So those two things, ease of doing business and quality labor force, I think are probably the two biggest gaps that need to be filled.
You've also said in that piece, you wrote a piece for the Washington Post as well after your recent trip to India, and one of the revolutions you named was the Geo Revolution, about how this company has made the internet affordable and available to a billion plus Indians. When we talk big tech, it's always been, the Facebooks and the Googles and the Microsofts. Do you see big tech from India now at an inflection point where it can sort of provide solutions to the world? It can become global conglomerates, technology solution providers, if you will, much like these big tech companies have been for the last 20 years plus?
I think there's the potential. Right now, you really have one player that has the ambition and execution capacity to do that, and that is Reliance with Geo. Geo really is transformative because what it did is, if you look back even 5 or 7 years, the number of Indians connected to the internet was astonishingly low. Some estimates were 50 to 70 million, because broadband, fiber, laying of cable lines in India was very hard. What Geo did was it completely leapfrogged this by connecting Indians to the internet via 4G, via cheap smartphones, and very low prices. And so India went from 121st on data usage to it's now number 1, and it's larger than the number 2 and 3 put together, China and the US. So it's a real complete transformation. And you have to give Mukesh Ambani extraordinary credit for the vision of the ambition, but also then execution. This is a $40+ billion bet, largest bet ever made, largest investment ever made by an Indian private sector company. And it's paid off. Now what's happening is on that platform, Reliance is building a huge entertainment, sports, news complex, of which obviously TV18 is one part. But if you look at the IPL numbers, it's extraordinary. And you look at the sophistication with which IPL is being transmitted with 6 camera angles, 14 languages. You can listen to you can watch the IPL and listen to it in Bhojpuri if you want. That I think is innovative on by global standards. So I think that what Geo shows is the potential for India to lead the world in some areas of this, but it's worth noting it's so far the only example. I mean, there are a few others, but for the most part, tech in India has tended to mean IT services. Now we have the possibility to watch innovation along many lines, along the kind of digitization of data, of entertainment, and things like that, of software, I'm hoping. And I think that could produce something very, very extraordinary. It's one of the reasons I am very excited about the idea of a kind of tech corridor between the US and India.
One final word. You've also said in that piece about how you've seen this movie before and the story got derailed in the 2010s. So what are the potential pitfalls that are likely there down the road, which India has to be mindful of? And you've also said that one of the things that worries you about this India story is the religious polarization, which could potentially derail the growth story. Could you elaborate on both, please?
Sure. Look, it's simply a matter of fact that India has been here before. There was enormous excitement about the Indian economy around 04, 05, or 06, or 07. If you look at the average growth rate at that time, it was close to 9%. Right now India is growing at I think 5.5 or 6%. So you could understand why there was that kind of excitement. There were years that India was growing faster than China. And there was a sense in which everyone was expecting India to continue on that trajectory, and then it fell off. And I think a number of problems happened. One, a lot of foreign companies who came into India made big investments and experienced the problems I was describing: the ease of doing business, things like that, land acquisition, all the usual license quota Raj issues of India that still persist, even though there has been enormous progress in the last 10 years. I don't want to in any way suggest that I'm not aware of that. I am, but if you just compare India globally, and as I say, to a country like Indonesia, let alone China, there's still a path to go. So that's the part I worry about. I do worry about education, getting a skilled workforce, providing opportunities to the millions of people in rural India who, still the majority of India still lives in the rural areas. And then there's this larger issue of inclusion. Probably the most significant one is female inclusion. Women participate in the labor force in India at the lowest rates, virtually of any major economy in the world. I think Indians would be stunned to learn that Saudi Arabia has a higher rate of female participation in the labor force than India does. And finally, there is the issue of Indian Muslims who are a backward community, who have not been able to achieve in educational terms, in economic terms, what they should do. And, those kind of inequalities always have the danger of producing political problems, but they should be addressed even just for economic reasons, for economic inclusion. India, one of the great things about India is it is an open, pluralistic society, an open, pluralistic political system. And the goal should be to bring everyone along, to bring men and women, Hindus and Muslims, upper caste, middle caste, lower caste. And when it works that way, you see, the whole society benefiting. My fear is it's not just in India. You look at inequalities that have sharpened around the world, and then those inequalities become polarizing features, and they become political divisions, and they become cultural divisions, and that can derail things not just economically but in social terms as well. So, as I say, I came back very bullish about India, but I want to see India fulfill its potential. I want it to become what the slogan is, incredible India with the exclamation mark at the end. And in order to do that, I just hope it focuses in on uplifting all Indians.
All right. Fareed Zakaria, as always, a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for your time and your insights.